Hello, my name is Kate Chisholm. I have the privilege of serving as Capital Power's Chief Strategy and Sustainability Officer.
Well, hi, Kate. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today. Can you just begin by briefly describing Capital Power, what it does in general, but also what it does specifically in the hydrogen space, if you don't mind?
Sure. Capital Power is a publicly traded independent power producer. We're headquartered in Alberta, but we have over 6,400 megawatts of capacity located in 26 plants all around North America, and we have four more in development. So we're very growth oriented and we are very future oriented. In fact, our purpose is to provide to power the world sustainably for generations to come. And so we work very hard on reducing emissions from thermal generation and expanding North America's renewable portfolio as well. On specifically in hydrogen, Tim, Capital Power actually sees the pathway to 2050 as being sort of a linear journey from carbon capture, utilization, and storage through to hydrogen and net carbon neutral power grid. And so we've been working on emission reduction from thermal generation since 2007. We've had a number of CCUS projects. And you might know that CCUS is one of the two main ways that we produce hydrogen for energy production. One way is through the electrolysis of water, and we expect that getting closer to 2050 and 2035 to 2050, that will be the main way of producing hydrogen for power consumption. But between now and then, we believe that more hydrogen will be produced from CCUS, which is, as I said, carbon capture, utilization, and storage.
How are you seeing the hydrogen space in Edmonton and Alberta specifically, but also Canada at large, evolving? And how do you see that playing out over the coming years?
Above all, it's important to note that there are some incredibly keen, brilliant minds working on hydrogen all over Canada. But in Edmonton and in Alberta specifically, there are some really cool projects. For example, the province announced earlier this summer that they were going to donate money to Air Products' $1.3 billion hydrogen complex. And so there is already a momentum going on to make Alberta sort of a hydrogen hub for Canada. There are lots and lots of people at both of our major universities are focused on this directly. In addition, there are really cool investments being made. And so, for example, on Monday, I took part in an announcement in which the province was providing money to CP Rail, which is sort of an unexpected source for some of this work. And what they've done is they are retrofitting two locomotives. They've already done one to be powered with hydrogen. And these locomotives are going to carry freight trains between Calgary and Edmonton and Lethbridge, completely emission free. And so this is a pilot program, but they're hoping that as they gain experience with this, they will be able to sort of decarbonize the entire freight rail system in Canada. And so I'm very excited by the fact that a lot of this really cool work is happening right here in Calgary, in Edmonton, and Alberta. A lot of the technology to produce hydrogen or to produce carbon, to capture carbon and make fuels like hydrogen is already there, but the demand isn't there. And so what we need to do is create that demand. And so, for example, in the CP Rail example, my understanding is that they're using water electrolysis to create hydrogen in Calgary, but they're using CCUS to create their hydrogen in Edmonton. And it is our hope that people will want to have their goods transported by hydrogen fueled locomotives, hydrogen fueled trains.
You've mentioned CCUS, or carbon capture, utilization, and storage, a few times already. And it is, as you've said, critical to the whole hydrogen equation and roadmap. How attractive is Canada's CCUS space to foreign investors? It is a space that we have developed some experience and expertise in. Is that being recognized on the global space and attracting FDI to Canada?
It's important for the audience to understand that CCUS is really important from a decarbonization perspective because it's so far the only sort of type of technology that will both avoid emitting new carbon into the atmosphere, but also potentially remove carbon from the atmosphere through direct air capture. Strangely enough, let's say, there are a lot of investors, especially outside of Canada and the US, that understand maybe better than some Canadians and Americans that we don't hate necessarily fossil fuels. What we hate is the carbon emissions from them, the greenhouse gas emissions from them. And so, to the extent that we can burn fossil fuels without emitting greenhouse gases, that's sort of a win-win because there are areas of the world, Canada and the US included, Russia's another one, where there is abundant fossil fuel, which could keep the cost of decarbonization low if only we could make it more environmentally friendly. And so there are ESG investors, for example, in Europe that understand this very well, and they are very interested in our progress here in terms of propelling decarbonization using CCUS. And when they do that, they rely on the fact that there are industry experts like the International Environmental Agency and others that are saying that CCUS, along with an expansion in renewables, energy efficiency, et cetera, are sort of the keys to getting to that 2050 net carbon neutral point. Now, as far as Canada is concerned, of course, our record for human rights and some of the social problems is very good, but we're also becoming an environmental leader. And so there is, as far as Canada is concerned, growing group not only of ESG investors directly investing in responsible companies, but they're also placing pressure on the banks, for example, to consider ESG considerations into their financing. They're placing pressure on insurance companies to consider ESG in their assessment of business risks, and they're also placing a lot of pressure on credit rating agencies to consider ESG considerations in their business risks and their assignment of credit ratings. And so all of this is coming together to a point where ESG considerations are at least as important to many investors, financiers, risk managers as the financial ones. And we like that trend. We think that's the right thing for Canada and the world.
When you look at Edmonton and Canada, in terms of our competitive advantages for attracting FDI to the hydrogen space, to the carbon capture, utilization, and storage space, what stands out in terms of our USPs or where we compete best?
Let's be frank, Alberta has a burning platform. We need to figure this out. And because of that, we have attracted some of the best minds in the world in order to help us address the energy transition problem and to help us over time convert what has been a heavy emitter of greenhouse gas into what we hope will be low or no carbon industry. And so we have a lot of expertise here. We also have the desire to be the world leader. In terms of hydrogen, for example, and CCUS, we have in Alberta geology that will allow us to capture and sequester both carbon and hydrogen. Hydrogen storage is a bit of a long putt at the moment because hydrogen has a very low volumetric density, and so it's hard to capture and it's very expensive to store. And it's also harder to move through pipelines at the moment, at least through our existing pipeline system, because it's caustic and it burns at very low temperatures and there are safety concerns. But we have the people that are working on all of these problems and figuring out how to move hydrogen through pipelines, how to store and then store captured carbon and then use it to create hydrogen and so on. And so I think probably along with our desire to solve this problem, the biggest advantage we have is so many really, really great brains focused on it at the moment.
Kate, we're going to wrap up, but I want to know what you think has to be done and by who to accelerate Canada's hydrogen opportunity, but also to attract more foreign investors into our hydrogen sector.
Well, thanks, Tim. At a high level, three things need to happen. First of all, we need policy to settle down. You heard me talk about the size of some of the investments that are needed. Uh, when you're making a 2 billion or a 5 billion or a $3 billion investment that you hope to live over decades, your shareholders would assassinate you if you did that irresponsibly. And so what you need to do is to have some confidence in your project economics. And what that requires is policy stability. So we need to sort of all be rowing our canoe in the same direction so that we can take these big bets. That's the first thing. The second thing is we're going to need subsidies in the beginning because, as you and I discussed, the demand isn't necessarily there yet. So we're going to provide the supply of these carbon reducing technologies with the hopes that people will actually use them and buy them. But until that happens, we're going to need some help from government. And so we're seeing both in Alberta and federally investments in CCUS, which will form the hydrogen infrastructure needed to take us out to 2050. And the final thing is we need a sort of a high level of sort of coordination. And this is maybe the hardest thing because eventually what we're going to want to do is convert pipeline systems over to hydrogen and so on. And that requires the collaboration of industry players, regulators, communities, so that we can convert things that are now using natural gas to hydrogen and so on. And that level of coordination is going to require a lot of planning. And so I know there are a lot of people out there that would like us to be able to sort of do the genie, and make it all happen. But it's actually going to take some planning and some very careful thought.